The HatMan is one of those phenomena that you can't believe happens unless you see it for yourself. There isn't really anything like that set up for the presence of HatMan, unlike ghost hunting detection gear that can collect viral proof of the ghost world. Is it a legend? Is it a being from another dimension? What about the scientific community's opinion on the sleep paralysis claim? Perhaps that is the most rational answer. But one thing remains true. The experience of HatMan goes back many years and is a global phenomenon. If it's sleep paralysis, how and why are so many people experiencing it? Here are a few allegedly true encounters with the HatMan. I always referred to the HatMan I saw as a kid as a shadow person, because I didn't really realize that shadow people didn't all have the hats. But I just found out yesterday on another subreddit that it has its own name. I saw him quite a lot around the house when I was little. I'd be on the floor reading a book and see him in my peripheral, and when I would look, he slid away out of sight or ran away really quickly. Or there would be times when I would be in my bed with my bedroom door open, and I would see him standing down the hall staring at me. Anyway, we had a weird incident where my dad was out working and my mum had gone to bed. It was really late at night. I was downstairs and I turned off the TV and headed upstairs to bed. We had a bathroom right at the top of the stairs, and I saw a man in there, in the dark. Except he was real. The guy had some type of goggles on him that I'm assuming was night vision. He put a finger to his lips to basically tell me not to scream. I ran to my bedroom and was terrified. Since I could see the top of the stairs from my bed, I peeked out and saw him run down the stairs. Eventually my dad got home really late, and the next morning he asked us why the front door was left open. It had been closed when I went up to bed. Since I saw the guy who was in the house, my dad took me to the police station to describe him and make a report. He didn't take anything or do anything besides just creeping around in my house in the dark, as far as we know. Since I'm mentioning this guy, I thought I might as well tell the police about the HatMan too. The police did not really want to pursue anything further after that, and they dismissed the whole actual man in my house situation. My dad didn't make me feel like I was imagining things, but he didn't argue about the police not caring, so I think that he did question if I had actually seen what I said I did. We still couldn't explain the window or door though. We also found one of our downstairs windows open with the screen cut. Weird, because I didn't hear a thing when I was watching TV, and I was all alone. My mum and siblings were asleep at the time, so this guy could have done whatever he wanted to me. A couple of weeks later, my dad was in the kitchen, and out of the corner of his eye, he saw HatMan. Since I had just recently reported seeing someone in the house, he thought that this guy had broken in again. HatMan was initially standing at one end of the kitchen, but ran around the corner into the living room area when my dad saw him. My dad ran to follow it, and was completely bewildered because nobody was there. Our house growing up was always really messy. Toys and papers were all over the floor at all times. 6 kids and my parents didn't care. And he was weirded out that the thing he saw running made no noise at all when he went into the living room. He or it would have definitely stepped on some things and made noise. He believed me after that, but I actually did not see HatMan anymore after my dad saw him. This was the 90s, and I was just a kid, like 2nd grade. I didn't have any resources to try and figure out what this shadow man with a hat actually was, and I didn't learn about shadow people until I was an adult. This is my own personal experience with the HatMan. The sheer fact that so many people have seen and experienced this entity is extremely interesting. How is it possible for one form to be perceived by so many different people? Not to mention, I can only assume about 20 to 30%, if that, of the people whom experienced him have spoken out. This will be my first time too. I was between 7 and 10 years old. I remember this day like it was yesterday. Me and my brother pulled an all-nighter. We didn't go to sleep until like 1 or 2 a.m., which was very late for us. He slept on the bottom bunk while I slept on the top bunk. That night we went to bed as we normally would. I climbed up my ladder. I tucked under my Spider-Man blanket. And as I laid down, for no more than 3 minutes, the room goes cold. And I mean cold. It literally felt like the air conditioning was turned on, but it wasn't. At the same time, I noticed that the posters on my walls started to move, as if the air was turned on. I'm not going to lie about any of the things I'm going to say here. I will be completely and utterly honest. I knew what this feeling was, for I have felt this before. The air was heavy, and it felt like everything went quiet and still. I couldn't even hear the breathing of my own brother, yet we went to sleep at the same time. He seemed to have fallen asleep instantaneously from the moment his head hit the pillow. The room was dark, but not as dark as what I saw next. From the furthest corner of my room, I saw behind the door a tall figure wearing a long coat and a fedora-style hat. He stood there, darker than anything else in the entire room. I could see his figure perfectly. He was there, and I don't know why. I was completely terrified, scared to my very core. But what I did next may surprise all of you. From my bed, I kept looking at it, and then I jumped and ran out of my bed and ran directly towards him. I ran into him and opened my door and ran into my parents' room right next to me. I was terrified and didn't know what to do. Fight or flight. Anyways, I slept in my parents' room, and from that day, he never showed himself to me ever again. Though I can't say if he visited me before that, but my soul tells me he may have many times before. This story happened about 8 years ago, and it still pops into my head from time to time, so I thought I'd share it here. If you have experienced anything similar to what I'm about to tell you, please let me know. So it was 2013, and little 12-year-old me was laying in bed. It was probably about 10 p.m, I'm assuming, because that's when I usually went to sleep. I was laying on my side facing a wall, and I heard walking that sounded fairly close to me. I thought nothing of it, because I thought that maybe my sister or someone was going to use the bathroom. From what I can remember, the walking was very slow-paced, which I thought was weird. The walking then stopped, but I didn't hear the door open for the bathroom, and I know I would have heard it, because it's just across from my bedroom. After a while of facing the wall, I decided to turn onto my other side, which would mean I would now be facing my open room. When I flipped over, I gasped and froze. I couldn't move at all, and I was holding my breath. I will never forget what I saw. It was a tall man dressed in a long black coat with a big hat on. The man was very tall, and I know this may sound odd, but he was darker than the pitch-black darkness that swallowed my room. He was standing in the farthest corner of my room, just staring at me. He didn't move whatsoever, and neither did I. I don't know how long I was frozen staring at him, holding my breath. It could have only been a minute, but it felt like forever. I can't describe the terror that came over me when I saw him standing there. I can't even remember what I was thinking at the time. Then I woke up in the morning. I don't even remember falling asleep or exhaling. I just woke up. Now, some of you may be thinking, that was all probably a dream, maybe even sleep paralysis. I would think that too, had it not been for the 2 large footprints in the carpet right where I saw him standing the night before. I did take a picture of the footprints, but sadly the picture is gone. I've looked for it everywhere, and I just can't find it, so you'll have to just take my word for it. I told my sister about what I had experienced the next morning, and she said, "Have you ever heard of the HatMan?" I said no, and she explained to me who he was. After researching a bit, I found that there are a few people who have also seen this man, and they also say he doesn't do anything but stare at them. It has been 8 years and I haven't seen him since. Maybe it was all my imagination, but it felt so real. I refused to sleep in my room for years after that because I was afraid I'd see him again. Luckily, I never did, and I hope I never do. Those were 3 Reddit users' encounters with the HatMan. But I too have a memory of something similar, which I will share with you now. I must have been around 4 or 5, so this was the late 90s. I remember laying in my bed, facing my open door which had a clear view of the stairway. Although it was pretty much pitch black, I recall seeing a shadow accompanied by footsteps ascending the stairs. Unfortunately, as it was so long ago, I can't seem to recall if it ever reached the top, or if I hid under the covers. But I'll always recall it as odd, as thinking back to it, I remember it having something on its head and shoulder area. After discovering the HatMan a short while ago, things seemed to fall into place. Perhaps the shadow adorned a hat, and as for the shoulders, could it have been a collar? I've never experienced anything of the like after this, but I did suffer sleep paralysis up until my early 20s. What do you think? Have you had an experience with the HatMan or shadow people before? Let me know in the comments below. Don't forget to subscribe, and if you'd like me to read a story of yours, send it to my Twitter, which is in the description below. Thanks for listening.